The last bus I drove that Thursday was not supposed to be mine. Near the end of my shift, another driver went home sick, and dispatch asked me to cover the final segment of his east side route. Lauren knew I was working late, but she had no reason to expect me on that exact bus. By 10 o'clock, downtown had thinned out. The students were mostly gone, and most of the people getting on were tired enough to keep to themselves. I had been driving for the city for 11 years, long enough to know how quickly an unfamiliar route could still settle into routine. That night stayed ordinary until 10:20. I remember the time because I had just checked the dashboard clock before pulling into a stop beside a strip of restaurants on the east side of Columbus. Running 2 minutes behind, I was thinking about where I could make up the time when a man and a woman stepped away from the shelter. The man was the one I recognized first. Ryan Cole was one of the private coaches at the soccer club, where my 12-year-old son Ethan trained. I had spoken to him at practices, nodded to him at games, and once listened to him explain why Ethan needed to stop opening his hips too early when receiving the ball. Then I saw the woman beside him and knew immediately that it was my wife. Lauren had one hand in Ryan's, and neither of them let go until they were almost at the front door of the bus. For a second, my brain simply refused to arrange the scene correctly. I had been married to Lauren for 13 years. I knew the dark green coat she was wearing, the tan purse on her shoulder, and the silver ring on her right hand because Chloe had picked it out for Mother's Day. What made the scene impossible was where Lauren was supposed to be. She had told me she would be at Ethan's soccer club, late for a parent and training staff meeting. Over the previous months, soccer had seemed to generate some new meeting, practice, equipment pickup, volunteer night, or scheduling problem every week. Lauren handled most of it because my work hours changed more than hers did. Ryan stepped onto the bus first and looked directly at me. Recognition reached his face before he could hide it. Lauren came up behind him, lifted her eyes toward the driver's seat, and stopped so abruptly that Ryan nearly backed into her. I wanted to ask what the hell she was doing there. I wanted to ask why she had been holding our son's coach's hand. Instead, another passenger was waiting behind them, and there were still people sitting on my bus. I was still at work, and Lauren knew it too. She leaned toward me and lowered her voice. "Daniel, please finish your route, and we can talk when you get home." I looked past her at the person waiting outside and told her to move back so the other passenger could board. My voice sounded normal, which was the part I hated most. Ryan went toward the rear. Lauren sat several rows behind the front door, nowhere near him. If somebody had boarded at the next stop, they would have looked like two unrelated passengers. I closed the doors and pulled away. My hands stayed where I had trained them to stay, whenever I was angry, exhausted, distracted, or dealing with bad weather. There were still people on board who expected me to get them home safely, and my marriage was not their problem. Ryan got off several stops later without coming forward. Lauren stayed on until we were closer to our neighborhood, then stood near the front and waited until the bus stopped. "I am going home, but please don't do anything until we can talk," she said. I told her to get off the bus. She stepped down to the sidewalk, and I finished the route. The rest of the drive felt longer than it was. I did not watch Lauren in the mirror, or invent an excuse to end the route early. The passengers behind me had nothing to do with what had happened. Instead, I kept seeing Lauren's hand in Ryan's, and hearing her tell me to finish working, as though the dangerous part of the night would begin only after I stopped being responsible for everyone else. Ryan was not a stranger from a bar. He was Ethan's coach. Lauren had met him through something our family trusted. When I returned to the transit garage, I completed the shutdown procedure, logged what I needed to log, and drove home in my own car. Lauren was waiting at the kitchen table. Ethan and our 9-year-old daughter, Chloe, were asleep upstairs. Lauren began by saying she knew how what I had seen looked. I told her that was a strange place to start. She tried to explain that Ryan had been drinking, that he was upset, and that she had been making sure he got home. I reminded her that I had seen them holding hands before. Either of them knew I was driving the bus. Her explanation changed as she admitted that she and Ryan had become too close. They had talked outside the club, met for coffee, and crossed a line. I asked what crossed a line meant. Lauren said they had kissed, and that it had started only a few weeks earlier. I asked whether she had slept with him. She told me not to force the conversation while I was angry, then reminded me the kids were sleeping upstairs. I asked the same question again, but she still would not answer it. Her refusal told me more than the answer she wanted to postpone. If the truth had been only kissing, there was no reason to keep building walls around a simple yes or no. I could see her trying to manage the size of the night, giving me only enough truth to prevent the next question from becoming worse. I did not raise my voice. Ethan and Chloe were upstairs, and I had no intention of letting them wake to a fight they could not understand. That did not mean Lauren got to use their presence as a reason I had to accept partial answers. That was enough for me to end the conversation for the night. Every answer had required me to drag another answer out of her, and I was done doing that at midnight. I slept in the guest room and barely slept at all. The next morning, ordinary family life kept happening around us. Ethan could not find his training socks. Chloe wanted to know who had used the last clean cereal bowl. Lauren and I moved through the kitchen without looking at each other. Before leaving for work, she asked me to text when I was ready to talk. By noon, she texted first. She said she had already told Ryan that whatever was happening between them could not continue. That phrase bothered me because it sounded much bigger than a few kisses over a few weeks. I asked one question by text. How long had there been something between them? Lauren answered that it had been a few weeks, exactly as she had already told me. I did not believe her, though at that point I could not prove why. Driving helped more than staying home would have. A bus route gives you small problems with immediate answers. Traffic, a block stop, a passenger who needs more time, somebody asking how to get back after missing a transfer. You deal with what is in front of you. Marriage was not like that. I finished the shift without making any decisions about what would happen at home. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Lauren brought me her phone. She said she wanted me to see the messages with Ryan because they would prove she had never planned to leave me. She wanted me to understand what the relationship had been, and just as important to her, what it had not been. The thread was obviously incomplete. There were replies to missing messages and gaps in the dates. But I did not accuse her of deleting things. I read what she had chosen to show me. Most of the older messages could have passed for soccer, practice times, Ethan's availability, a tournament link. Then I found one from more than 4 months earlier. Ryan had written, "After everything that has happened between us, I don't know how you can act like this is nothing." I checked the date twice. Lauren saw exactly what I was looking at. I handed the phone back and told her that a few weeks was over. She admitted they had started talking months before and tried to explain that the relationship had developed in stages. I stopped her and asked directly whether she had slept with him, and this time she said yes. When I asked how far back the relationship went, she finally gave me the real number. About 7 months from the point where they first started crossing lines. It had not been physical the entire time, but it had been more than friendship long before the last few weeks. 7 months took me back to late winter, around the time Ethan had started extra sessions at the club. I remembered thanking Lauren for handling so much of the scheduling, because my work hours made family life complicated. That memory hurt more than I expected. I could remember standing in the kitchen before an early run while Lauren complained that soccer was becoming a second job. At the time, I told her I appreciated how much she was carrying, and I had meant it. Now I had no idea which part of that conversation had been real. I was not ready to believe every practice or meeting had been invented, and I did not want to become the kind of man who rewrote 13 years because of one discovery. 7 months was long enough to make ordinary memories unstable, though. Things I had never questioned now had 2 possible explanations, and I hated that Lauren had put me in a position where suspicion could reach backward into moments that had felt harmless at the time. Then she repeated that she had never planned to leave me. I told her intending to keep the marriage did not reduce what she had done inside it. Lauren insisted she had never looked for another house, never planned to take the kids, and never tried to replace me. I told her 7 months required the same choice over and over again. It was not one mistake that kept moving by itself. Then I asked what she had told Ryan about me. She admitted she had described our marriage as distant, said my schedule made things difficult, and told him we sometimes felt more like parents and roommates. When I asked whether Ryan believed our marriage was basically over, she tried to soften the answer. Eventually, she said the thing I needed to hear plainly. She had told him we were staying together for the kids. That sentence was worse than hearing that she loved him would have been. If she had told Ryan she was leaving me, at least the lie would have pointed toward a decision. Instead, She had described me as a man who would remain in place because fatherhood made leaving too expensive. Ryan did not need to believe I was cruel or absent. He only needed to believe I was dependable enough to stay, because I loved Ethan and Chloe too much to leave. Lauren had used the part of me she trusted most as reassurance that there would be no real cost. I stopped asking for details, because I already knew she had slept with our son's coach. The relationship had lasted in some form for 7 months. She had lied about where she was, and she had told Ryan that our children were the reason our marriage still existed. Lauren said she had never wanted to blow up our family. The way she said it made destruction sound like something that would happen later if I reacted badly enough. I told her to sleep in the guest room, because I needed space, and I was not the one leaving that night. Lauren looked toward the stairs and asked me not to make permanent decisions while the kids were in the house. Their feelings mattered more to me than anything else in that room, which was exactly why I noticed how quickly they were becoming a boundary around my reaction. After Lauren went upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen and opened the family calendar. I did not search her location, open her email, or try to find Ryan's address. I looked at something that unquestionably belonged to me, my own work history, including late runs and shifts Lauren had asked me to change because Ethan supposedly had soccer. Some of those soccer entries had to be real. Ethan really did have practices and games, but a new question replaced all the others. How many times had I changed my life to make Lauren's easier, while she was using that space to see him? Whether she had cheated was no longer the question. I wanted to know what she had used to make 7 months possible. Saturday morning, Ethan asked whether practice was still on. Lauren said it was, and I checked the family calendar before answering. The practice was real, and that distinction mattered. I did not want to turn 7 months of family life into one giant lie, simply because Lauren had hidden some lies inside it. I drove Ethan to the club, where Ryan was not there that morning. Another coach, Mark Ellison, ran the session and mentioned that Lauren was stepping back from the volunteer work she had been doing. When I asked what that work actually involved, Mark described informal parent coordination and scheduling reminders. Nothing close to the constant stream of meetings and obligations Lauren had made it sound like. Ethan did not notice anything unusual. He jogged onto the field, argued with another boy about who had taken the better ball, then forgot the argument 30 seconds later. Watching him forced me to separate what belonged to him from what Lauren had done around him. I did not want Ryan's name to contaminate every part of my son's sport. Ethan still loved practice, still wanted new cleats, and still cared whether he started in the next tournament. Whatever happened between the adults, I was not going to turn the club into a crime scene for him. I asked Mark whether there was a complete schedule for Ethan's group, and he sent me the link to the club portal. He also explained that parent meetings and volunteer events were either posted there or announced through the same parent email archive. There was nothing secret about any of it. I was Ethan's father, and I was finally looking directly at the schedule and notices for the team my son played on. When we got home, I compared the club calendar and archived notices with our family calendar. Most entries matched until I reached the 14th of March and found the first mismatch. Lauren had entered a parent scheduling meeting at 7, but the club had no meeting. The 3rd of April was listed as an equipment volunteer night, yet no such event appeared. The 26th of April was supposedly a tournament parent meeting, and once again the official schedule showed nothing. By the time I finished, 6 events on our family calendar had no matching club activity. 3 of those 6 were nights when Lauren had asked me to change my work hours. One was a Thursday when I traded into a later run because she claimed she had a parent meeting. Another was a Saturday when she said all parents were expected at tournament planning, so I picked up an extra shift. There had been no tournament planning session. Lauren found me looking at the dates and asked what I was doing. I asked whether the 14th of March meeting had existed. She said she could not remember every date. I gave her 2 more. Eventually, she admitted she had used soccer as an excuse sometimes. I told her the important part was not that she had seen Ryan while I happened to be working. Sometimes she had actively moved me into the hours she wanted. Lauren argued that it had not happened every time. I told her I had never claimed it had. She accused me of taking every normal thing our family had done for 7 months and turning it into part of the affair. I told her I was doing the opposite. I was separating what had been normal from what she had invented. When she asked what I wanted from her, I finally had an answer. I want my time back. From then on, Real practices, games, and parent meetings could go on the calendar. If something changed, we would use actual club information. If Lauren had a personal obligation, she could call it personal. What I would not do anymore was automatically rearrange my work because she attached Ethan's name to a request. Lauren asked whether I planned to monitor everywhere she went. I told her I was changing my schedule, not controlling hers. Before my next shift, a coworker named Carlos reminded me that I had tentatively agreed to take his late Thursday run. We had discussed it earlier because Lauren said she would be tied up with tournament scheduling. I checked the actual club calendar, confirmed there was nothing scheduled that night, and told Carlos I needed to keep my regular run. He shrugged and said he would ask someone else. The entire exchange took seconds. But it changed something real. I did not threaten Lauren or call Ryan. I simply stopped providing one of the conveniences that had made the affair easier. My time was no longer automatically available. While comparing the soccer entries, I had noticed something else. Some fake events had expenses attached to them. Equipment, tournament costs, parent dinners, extra training. Youth sports generate enough small charges that I had never questioned. Most of them. Lauren handled the soccer administration, and if she said something was for Ethan, I usually accepted it. Sunday afternoon, I opened our shared bank account and budgeting app. Most of the soccer expenses matched the club records, including registration, uniforms, private training, and tournament charges. Then I found what did not match: an $84 restaurant bill on a night marked as a parent meeting, a $62 parking charge downtown on another fake club night, a $137 dinner categorized under tournament weekend when Ethan's team had not played. There were smaller charges too: coffee, ride shares, parking, and other meals. I left out anything I could not connect clearly to a false explanation. The total came to a little over $2,100. The amount was not financially catastrophic. What mattered was the method: dinners, parking, rides, and other pieces small enough to disappear inside ordinary household spending. Some later hidden behind soccer-related labels. Lauren had not needed one huge secret expense. She had only needed me to keep trusting familiar categories, and some of those categories had used Ethan's name. When Lauren came home, I showed her the list. She immediately said not every charge had been for Ryan and offered to pay the money back from her own account. I told her moving money from one side of the same household to the other would not undo anything. Then I asked something more precise because I did not want to accuse her of more than she had done. Had she ever asked me for cash by saying Ethan needed it and then used that money to see Ryan? Lauren said she had not. The charges were already on our account. She had changed categories or descriptions later, so they would not stand out. That matched what I was seeing. It was still ugly, but it was a different mechanism. I told her the mortgage, household bills, and children's expenses would continue normally. I was not clearing accounts or using money as a weapon. What would change was trust. A soccer expense had to be an actual soccer expense. A kid expense had to be for the kids. If Lauren spent money on herself, she could call it hers. She asked whether I really thought the problem was labels in a budgeting app. I told her the problem was that I had trusted her enough not to check. Lauren felt the difference later that week when she had a dental office dinner on the same night Ethan had practice. Under the old system, she would have asked me to trade shifts, and I probably would have tried. Instead, I checked Ethan's schedule, confirmed the practice was real, checked my run, and told Lauren I could not take him. She asked whether I could switch. I told her I was keeping my scheduled shift. Lauren accused me of punishment again. I reminded her that every time I traded, another driver changed his life too. That had been worth doing when I believed we were solving family problems, but I was no longer treating every conflict in her calendar as mine to fix. She called another parent. Ethan got to practice, and Lauren arrived late to her staff dinner. Nothing in the family schedule collapsed. That was the first consequence she actually felt. Not my anger or sleeping apart, but the loss of an invisible convenience she had assumed would always be there. I felt the difference too. Refusing the shift trade did not make me feel powerful. Mostly it made me notice how often my time had been treated as the household's adjustable part. That system had worked, partly because I wanted it to work. I was proud of being the parent who could make a complicated week fit together, and I had never treated those changes as sacrifices worth keeping score over. Now, I had to separate generosity from automatic availability. Helping my children still mattered, making every conflict in Lauren's calendar. My responsibility did not. I still wanted to help my children. What I no longer wanted was a system where Lauren could create a problem, attach the word soccer to it, and assume I would absorb whatever inconvenience came next. A few days later, she told me she had ended things with Ryan, stepped away from the club volunteer group, and would give me passwords, location sharing, counseling, separate finances, or whatever else I needed. I acknowledged that she was trying. Although my restrained reaction clearly frustrated her, she asked what else she was supposed to do, and I told her I did not know yet. She wanted a checklist, and Ryan, open the phone, leave the club, make the money right, attend counseling, and then watch the marriage move back toward normal. I told her I was not waiting for enough tasks to be completed. I was trying to decide whether I still wanted the marriage now that I knew what it had actually contained for the previous 7 months. Lauren said I was acting as though she had used me. I told her she had, although I did not think she had planned every humiliation. What I believed was simpler. She wanted Ryan, wanted our house, wanted the children to keep their normal life, and wanted me to keep doing everything I had always done. Whenever those wants conflicted, she lied so she would not have to give one up. You wanted 2 lives, I told her, but only one of them had to pay bills, arrange the kids, move work around, and be there every morning. Lauren looked at me as though I had reduced our marriage to labor. But that was not what I meant. I was talking about the part of a relationship that becomes invisible precisely because someone keeps doing it. The ordinary structure had value, and she had depended on that value every time she stepped outside it. Ryan had gotten selected hours, dinners, messages, and a version of Lauren that could step away from ordinary life. I had been living inside the ordinary life. The insult was not that ordinary life was lesser. It was that she had depended on me, maintaining it while she temporarily escaped it, then expected the structure to remain untouched once the secret ended. Lauren said that was unfair. I told her it did not have to feel fair to be true. Then she said something that explained more than another 100 messages would have. If I had stopped it before you knew, I thought we could go back to normal. That was the plan. She did not intend to leave me or build a real future with Ryan. She intended to keep both worlds separate long enough to end one quietly and preserve the other. Before she went back inside, Lauren mentioned that her mother already knew we were having problems because she had asked why Lauren was no longer involved with soccer. I asked what she had told her. Lauren said only that our marriage was in trouble. The hesitation before she answered stayed with me. The next fight would not be about Ryan. It would be about the version of the story Lauren wanted everyone else to hear. My mother called first. She caught me at the transit garage between runs and said Lauren had contacted her. According to the version my mother heard, our marriage had already been struggling. Lauren had made a serious mistake, and I was now considering separation while still angry. My mother was careful not to defend her, but she reminded me there were 2 children in the house and warned me against making a permanent decision too quickly. I asked how long she thought Lauren's mistake had lasted. My mother admitted Lauren had made it sound recent. I told her 7 months. I told her the man was Ethan's soccer coach, that Lauren had used fake soccer meetings to see him, that she had asked me to change work shifts on some of those nights, and that she had hidden some of the spending under soccer-related labels. My mother went quiet because she had not known any of those details. I told her I was not asking her to choose sides. I only needed her not to pressure me, based on a version where Lauren had made one recent mistake, and I was about to destroy the family because I was angry. Before we hung up, my mother asked me not to let Ethan think the separation had anything to do with soccer. I promised I would not. Lauren was furious when she learned I had corrected the story. She accused me of humiliating her and turning a private marriage problem into a family trial. I reminded her that she, not I, had called my mother. I had not described sex, private messages, or anything that existed only to embarrass her. The only facts I corrected were the ones directly affecting the advice being aimed at me. Her younger sister, Megan, called later after hearing another shortened version. I gave her the same limited facts. Megan did not become my cheerleader, which was never what I wanted. She simply stopped telling me I should slow down until I had tried counseling. Lauren's mother was harder, she cried. Said Lauren had been wrong, and then immediately returned to what separation would do to Ethan and Chloe. I agreed that the children should not be punished, but I refused to treat staying married as the only possible definition of protecting them. By the end of the call, she was not supporting my decision. She was simply no longer arguing from a story in which Lauren had made one recent mistake. The pressure from both families faded once the timeline stopped being vague. No one disowned Lauren. No one announced that I was right about everything. Her mother still wanted us to save the marriage, and my father still told me 13 years should not be ended casually. The difference was that nobody could pretend my reaction was the largest threat in the story. Lauren changed strategies after that. She stopped arguing about whether the affair had really been 7 months and started talking about repair. After finding marriage counselors who accepted our insurance, Lauren offered permanent location sharing, access to her phone, and the message where she had told Ryan not to contact her outside. Unavoidable club matters. I believe she was trying. That did not answer the question I was actually asking. On an evening, she pushed the counselor information toward me and asked me to attend one session. I asked what she wanted the session to accomplish. She said, trust it first. Then she said the part that mattered more, if we don't even try. What do we tell the kids? The children were becoming an argument for preserving the marriage. I told her Ethan and Chloe could be told the truth they were old enough to hear. Their parents had an adult problem. None of it was their fault, and they did not have to solve it. Lauren said that was not what she meant. I knew it was not. What she wanted was a sequence in which I attended counseling, waited, gave repair a formal chance, and only then earned the right to leave without being accused of quitting too fast. I told her counseling could be useful if I decided I wanted to rebuild the marriage. I had not made that decision. A few days later, the problem stopped being theoretical. Ethan had practice on the same evening. Chloe had a school event. Under our old routine, Lauren would have taken Chloe, and I would have tried to trade my run so I could handle Ethan. This time I arranged for Ethan to ride with another player's family and planned to pick him up after practice, because my route ended nearby. Lauren looked surprised that the problem had been solved without my moving the shift. Ethan was perfectly happy with the arrangement, and nothing in his evening collapsed. After practice, I picked him up and stopped for fries on the way home. Halfway through the drive, he asked whether Lauren and I were getting divorced. I nearly missed the next turn. When I asked what made him think that, he said we did not talk normally anymore. I told him we were having a serious adult problem, and I did not yet know what would happen. Then he asked whether it was because of him or soccer. That question hurt more than anything, Lauren had said. I told him it was not because of him, and not because of soccer. When I told Lauren about the conversation, she went pale. She said this was exactly what she had been trying to prevent. I asked what she meant, and Lauren finally stopped speaking indirectly. If I moved out, I would not see the kids every day. My work schedule was difficult. A city bus did not end a route early, because a school event started at 6. A second home meant different mornings, separate weekends, more transportation, more expenses, and less time with each parent. She was using the reality because she knew it frightened me. That did not make the reality false. Since I had caught her, this was the first argument Lauren made that I could not dismiss by pointing back at the affair. Leaving would cost me time with Ethan and Chloe. That night I lay awake thinking about school mornings. I would miss in weekends when the house would be somewhere else. The next morning, I called a family law attorney. I did not call because I had decided to file. I called because I needed facts that did not come from Lauren, our relatives, or my own fear. The attorney asked ordinary questions about the marriage, the kids, our work, housing, finances, and whether either of us had done anything that made parenting unsafe. Then I asked the question I had come to ask. My work schedule changes all the time. Does that mean I can't have meaningful time with my kids? She told me it meant I needed a schedule that worked, which was very different from saying I could not do it. I explained the late runs, weekends, and shift trades, and she asked whether my seniority gave me access to a more predictable block. It did, although I would lose overtime and one of the better paying weekend rotations. She called that a life decision rather than a legal impossibility. I hated the answer because a legal impossibility would have made the choice for me. Instead, there was a path if I was willing to pay for it. She also told me that if I moved, I needed somewhere the children could actually stay. A cheap studio far from their schools would create more problems than it solved. A modest two-bedroom, near their existing routines, would make separation more workable. She warned me not to drain accounts, hide money, or turn the affair into a surveillance project. She also told me not to confuse proof of infidelity with proof that I could build a workable second household. The affair was already established. More screenshots would not solve school pickups, bedtime, rent, or my rotating runs. I left the office understanding that the hardest part of separation would not be proving why I wanted it. It would be building a routine the children could actually live inside. I had facts now, and those facts removed the excuse that practical problems made leaving impossible. If I stayed, that would be my choice. If I left, I needed a workable home, a workable schedule, and enough money to support the consequences of two households. That night, I opened a rental site. The first place was too far from the kids' schools. The second was cheaper, but had only one bedroom. A plain two-bedroom about 15 minutes from our house was not attractive, but the school commute worked, and the rent was possible if I cut back elsewhere. I drove past it after work the next day. The commute really was manageable, so I scheduled a viewing. Lauren saw the appointment on the family calendar and asked what the apartment complex was. I told her it was a place I was considering, and she said looking at apartments was no longer thinking but planning. Planning is how I find out whether this is possible. She reminded me again that the children needed stability. I told her that was exactly why I was looking near their schools. The apartment itself was ordinary: old cabinets, beige carpet, a small living room, and a second bedroom just large enough for two twin beds. I stood in that second bedroom longer than I needed to. Ethan would complain about sharing space with Chloe, and Chloe would complain that he left soccer gear everywhere. The room was smaller than what they had at home, but it was close to both schools and close enough that a weekday pickup would not become a 40-minute drive through traffic. The leasing agent gave me an application and said a similar unit should be available in about a month. I took the paperwork, without pretending that holding it was the same as signing it. Sitting in my car afterward, I accepted something I had not wanted to know. I could do it. The rent would hurt, but I could afford it if I cut back. The school routes worked, leaving my job as the remaining practical problem. So I talked to my supervisor, Frank. I told him I might need a more predictable schedule for family reasons. He opened the system and showed me what my seniority allowed. I could move out of some late rotating runs and into a steadier weekday block. I could protect alternating weekends more easily. The cost appeared immediately: less overtime, fewer late calls, and the loss of one better paying weekend rotation. Frank gave me a rough monthly difference. He did not try to talk me into or out of it. He only reminded me that once the block was assigned, changing back would depend on another opening. The choice was not permanent in the legal sense, but it was not something I could undo the next morning, because I regretted losing a good overtime weekend. The amount was large enough to notice every month, but not large enough to make the choice impossible. He told me I could think about it for a few days. At home, Lauren saw that I had started doing the math. She told me I did not have to rearrange my entire life. I could stay in the house, keep the same schedule, see the kids every day, sleep in another room, try counseling, and take whatever time I needed. Part of me wanted to accept because it was easier. Staying meant the same mortgage, school mornings, route home, and bedrooms. I could stay and let time make the decision for me. That temptation frightened me more than the apartment. The next morning, I called Frank and took the weekday block. The change would start in 2 weeks. When Lauren saw the updated schedule, she understood immediately. "You gave up overtime for this." I told her I had changed the schedule so that if the kids were with me, I could actually be there. She reminded me that I could have them every day if I stayed. I told her I knew. That answer stopped the argument because I was not pretending the trade-off did not exist. I would lose money. I would see the kids less than I did living under one roof. 2 households would cost more than one. Lauren had not been wrong about those problems. What she had been wrong about was what I would do once the problems became real. The schedule was no longer hypothetical. I had already given up money to create room for the possibility that my children could live with me part of the time. For 7 months, my work schedule had been one of the things that made the affair easy. Now, I had changed it for a different reason. I was not trying to catch Lauren or punish her. I was making sure that if I chose to leave, being a father would still fit inside my life. She had finally put the real price in front of me. I had started paying it. The new work schedule took effect while I was still deciding what to do about the apartment. I did not like the weekday block. The traffic was worse, the overtime was lower, and one of the better-paying Saturday rotations was gone. But I was home earlier on more evenings, and I could finally look at a week and know which nights I could actually be responsible for Ethan and Chloe without asking another driver to rearrange his life. Lauren noticed the difference, and her efforts to repair the marriage became more organized once the work change was real. She kept offering transparency, changed personal commitments around the evenings I was home, and reminded me that Ryan was gone. She asked me once more to attend counseling. Her effort was real, but I also knew I did not want to rebuild the marriage. That was harder to say than anger had been, because it meant there was no final task Lauren could complete to make the answer change. When she asked me to attend one counseling appointment, I asked whether she would accept it if I went and still chose to leave. Lauren admitted she did not know. I told her that meant the appointment was partly about buying more time. She said, wanting more time did not make her evil, and I agreed. Then I told her I did not owe the marriage extra months, simply because delay made the possibility of separation feel less immediate. She canceled the appointment. 2 days later, I completed the apartment application. The leasing office approved it the following afternoon. For several minutes, I sat in my car outside the transit garage with the approval email open on my phone. Looking at apartments and talking to the attorney had both been ways of gathering information. Changing my work schedule had still left room for me to tell myself I was preparing for possibilities. Approval meant an address was waiting if I chose it. I signed the lease. Lauren was helping Chloe with homework when I got home. After the kids went upstairs, I put the confirmation on the kitchen table and told her I had signed. She stared at the paper for a long time. By then, Lauren had already seen me angry, watched me stop changing shifts, and seen me talk to an attorney and reduce my overtime. The lease frightened her differently. There would now be another place where Ethan and Chloe had beds. Lauren said she thought I was still deciding. I told her I had been deciding and that I had made the decision to move out. She asked whether everything she had been doing meant nothing. I told her it meant something. The next week was mostly calendars, and there was nothing satisfying about that work. Lauren and I sat at the kitchen table and worked through school mornings, soccer practice, Chloe's dance class, pickups, weekends, and the parts of my job that still could not be perfectly controlled. My new schedule made 2 school nights with me realistic. Alternating weekends worked, and extra time could be added when it made sense. It was not a perfect 50-50 split. It was a schedule we could actually live. Then we had to tell the kids. We agreed beforehand that there would be no affair details and no mention of Ryan. Ethan and Chloe did not need to become jurors in their parents' marriage. I told them I was moving into an apartment nearby and that they would spend regular time there. Chloe immediately asked whether she had to change schools. I told her no. Then she asked whether she had to choose where to live. I told her she did not choose between us. Ethan asked whether the separation was because of soccer. She told him it was not because of him and not because he played soccer. It was because of choices she had made as an adult. She did not explain the choices, but she also did not push the blame onto me, and that mattered. Later that night, I heard Ethan crying in his room. There was no revenge in that sound. And Lauren had been right about the cost. One home was becoming 2, and our children did not benefit from pretending that change was painless. A few days later, I bought what I had never expected to buy twice: sheets, towels, cheap plates, toothbrushes, 2 small desks, and a used dresser. My father helped me assemble some of the heavier furniture, and I spent more money than I expected on things that had always existed invisibly in one household: a trash can, shower curtain, laundry basket, kitchen utensils, another set of chargers. None of it felt dramatic. The receipt total was simply another reminder that 2 homes cost more, because ordinary life has to exist twice. The apartment looked temporary until Ethan and Chloe began leaving things there during visits before the move. The apartment was becoming ordinary to them, and that mattered more than making it impressive. A few days before the move, Lauren and I sat at her kitchen table with the next month's parenting calendar between us. Soccer practices were entered from the actual club schedule. My work block was printed beside the school dates. My apartment address was at the top. We worked through most of the month without trouble. Then Lauren reached a Saturday that belonged to me and stopped. "You gave up that route for this weekend." I told her yes. She looked at the calendar for a moment and said, "You always told me you'd do anything for them." I knew what she meant. The sentence underneath nearly every argument since I caught her had been the same. You love the kids. You value stability. You hate missing their lives. Therefore, you stay. I looked at the calendar and saw 2 school nights with me most weeks, alternating weekends, a smaller paycheck, and a second home. Everything I had changed because I still intended to be their father. "I am doing things for them," I said. Lauren shook her head and told me I knew what she meant, and I told her that I did. "I am not leaving for them. I am leaving because I don't want to stay married to you. Everything else changed because I am still their father." Her face tightened as I told her that for 7 months she had counted on one thing. She believed loving Ethan and Chloe meant I would absorb whatever happened between us, because the alternative would cost me time with them. Lauren did not deny it. She had told Ryan we were basically together for the kids. After I found out, she kept pointing to what separation would cost them and what it would cost me. Every time I started making separation realistic, she expected the cost to make me stop. Lauren said she had been scared and had not wanted to lose her family. I believed that fear was real, but it did not change what she had expected me to tolerate. She said she had never thought I was weak. I told her weak was not the word. Lauren asked what I thought she had believed about me, that I was trapped by being a good father. She looked at me while I admitted that I had not planned the sentence. It was simply the clearest way I knew to say it. "I am still their father. I just won't stay your husband because you used that against me." Lauren stopped arguing because the new work block, signed lease, and parenting schedule were already real. Ethan and Chloe already had beds waiting at the apartment. She could not ask whether I was willing to pay the price anymore. I was already paying that price, and we finished the calendar. A sweatshirt appeared on a chair, crayons collected in a drawer, and soccer socks ended up under a bed. Those ordinary objects did more to make the separation real than any legal document had. 2 days before I moved the rest of my clothes, Lauren told me she had spoken to Ryan again. I had not called him, followed him, or asked the club for updates. Lauren brought him back into the story herself. She said she wanted to know whether what had happened between them had ever meant enough for him to imagine a real future. Ryan told her he cared about her. Then he told her he had never expected her to leave her family. Lauren had told him our marriage was basically over. Yet he had never built his life around that claim. When she asked whether he had imagined them living together, he admitted he had not planned for a household with 2 children, school mornings, bills, practices, and a co-parenting schedule. Lauren looked humiliated when she told me. She said Ryan had cared about the relationship as long as it existed around his schedule and hers. But the idea of becoming part of school mornings, shared bills, and 2 children's routines had never become real to him. I had no reason to decide whether that made him cowardly or merely honest. Either way, the future Lauren had allowed herself to imagine was not waiting for her. I did not feel triumphant. Ryan had been willing to exist inside selected hours. He had not designed his life to carry the structure around those hours. Lauren had believed she could preserve one life while borrowing from another. Now neither version existed the way she had imagined. She asked whether I was satisfied that Ryan did not want the whole thing. I told her his answer did not change my decision. She asked why it mattered then. "It matters because you spent 7 months acting as if I was the permanent part, and he was the part you could enjoy without consequences. Now you know neither of us was standing where you thought." That was the last serious conversation I had about Ryan. I moved the following weekend, and my father helped with the larger furniture. Ethan complained that the apartment stairs were annoying. Chloe decided the smaller bedroom window needed curtains immediately. The first night the kids stayed with me, I checked both bedrooms more times than necessary. I checked because seeing their things there made the new arrangement feel real. That was the thing Lauren had repeatedly treated as the reason I would never leave, my need to remain their father. She had been right about the need. She had been wrong about what it required. The legal process moved more slowly than the physical separation, with forms, temporary agreements, attorney calls, and financial conversations that neither of us enjoyed. None of that changed the central decision. No one became rich or ruined. Lauren kept her job, and I remained on the lower-paying work block. Ryan continued coaching, although Lauren no longer volunteered around the team, and I kept my contact with him limited to what Ethan's participation made unavoidable. The children adapted in the uneven way children do. Some exchanges were easy while others were tense, and I still missed mornings. I missed Chloe calling from the hallway after bedtime. I missed hearing Ethan complain about breakfast when it was not my day. There were evenings when the apartment was too quiet. There were also evenings when it was not quiet at all. Ethan left cleats in the hallway. Chloe complained about the Wi-Fi, and both of them argued over whose turn it was to choose dinner. Those nights did not recreate the old house, but they proved that a smaller home was still a home, and that parenting had not disappeared simply because the address changed. Those were not evidence that leaving had been wrong. They were the price. Lauren kept friends in her life, and her parents did not abandon her. The soccer club did not stage some public punishment of Ryan. The consequences were more ordinary than that. Lauren had to manage her own time without assuming mine would move first. She had to share parenting through a schedule instead of the old household routine. She had to live with the fact that the relationship she risked our marriage for had never been designed to replace it. I had consequences too. My apartment was smaller, and my income was lower. Some nights the rooms were too quiet because the kids were with Lauren. I learned that disliking a consequence did not mean the decision that caused it was wrong. Months after the night on the bus, I was finishing an afternoon route when I pulled into a stop near the edge of downtown. Traffic was backed up. Somebody had complained about the air conditioning, and I was thinking about whether there was enough milk at the apartment. Then I saw Ethan and Chloe waiting near the stop with my father. They were not there to ride my bus. It was one of my weekends, and Dad had picked them up from Lauren because her schedule overlapped the end of my shift. Ethan had his soccer bag over one shoulder. Chloe saw me through the windshield and waved too hard while my father lifted a hand beside her. There were still passengers on board, so I did what I had done the night everything started. I finished the route. I drove the remaining stops, returned the bus, and clocked out. Then I walked back toward my kids. Ethan complained that I had taken too long. Chloe wanted to know what we were having for dinner. They started arguing about pizza before we reached the car. I thought about the night Lauren had stepped onto my bus with Ryan and asked me to finish my route. She had known me well enough to know I would. What she had misunderstood was what that said about me. Being responsible meant I handled what actually belonged to me. My job, my responsibilities to my children, and the consequences of my own decisions. It did not mean I owed her the marriage simply because leaving it was painful. I unlocked the car. Ethan threw his soccer bag into the back seat. Chloe called the front seat before he could. They argued about that too. I started the engine and drove us home. If you enjoy stories where betrayal finally meets consequences, subscribe for the next one. This is Blood Never Lies.